Okay, so the title is The Astral Light, the Elementals and Karma, and this is a brief description of it, which you will have read. My screen is partly obscured by all the messages coming through. All action creates karma, and its memory is held in the astral light, sometimes referred to as the Akashic record. Now, probably you're more familiar with that term if you know about these subjects. H.P. Blavatsky never referred to it as the Akashic record, but Edgar Cayce did, and a lot of people know that term from him and probably from other sources, but it's the same thing. In order for us to perform actions which do not create unhelpful and destructive karma, it is beneficial to understand the part played by the elemental energies, which can assist or hinder us. By heeding the teaching on this subject, we can understand that we have a choice as to whether to work to the detriment of ourselves and humanity, or to raise both by the cultivation of brotherly feeling, in either of which endeavors the elemental energies will come to our aid. So it's really very, very important. So I'm going to start with the astral light. And by the way, what put me onto this originally, because I did teach this subject over 3 sessions at a summer school, and so it's very condensed tonight, is a wonderful book called Deity, Cosmos and Man. I don't know if it's very small, but it's written by Geoffrey Farthing, G.A. Farthing. It's available as a download, a free download. So Deity, Cosmos and Man. And I was studying it with a former president of the society, Colin Price. And first we read about the astral light, and then we read about the elementals. And then all this about karma came into it, and I suddenly saw the strong link between these 2 subjects. And I got very, very interested. So we'll start with the astral light. And I just want to say one thing about a word that's going to appear, which is that word you could see there, Akasha. Now, normally when it's put into normal English, it's spelled A-K-A-S-H-A. And what you're seeing on the screen is the Sanskrit transliteration, which is a universally recognized transliteration. And an S, letter S with that dash over it, is pronounced as a sh. And the 2 A's are long, so it's Akasha. It's the right way to say it. Well, I mean, as near as a Western person can say it. So these notes for some of this in the astral light, it's based on Deity, Cosmos and Man. So the astral light is the densest level of Akasha. There are a number of levels of Akasha, beginning with its purest state and with increasingly dense levels until the level of the astral, light. So what is Akasha? The originating one is described as the rootless root of all existence. Akasha denotes the primordial root substance. So the originating one is the rootless root, and the Akasha is the primordial root substance, which HPB defines as the subtle, supersensuous spiritual essence which pervades all space. The secret doctrine teaches of the existence of a primordial root substance called Akasha that manifests after the long night or pralaya of the universe. This is to do with the cyclic nature of creation, periods of manifestation and non-manifestation. So that pralaya is when the manifestation disappears. And the secret doctrine teaches of, secondly, the gradations of this substance throughout the planes of nature, causing, for example, our physical globe to be enveloped in the lower of these grades, termed in the literature the astral light. And I'll explain this further. Each plane of nature is akasha in one of its 7 states. Now, the whole subject of the planes of nature is another big topic which I can't go into, but you can read all about it in the Deity, Cosmos and Man. The lowest state is the earth itself, and the next lowest is termed the astral light. This is defined as the invisible region that surrounds our globe as it does every other. A subtle essence, visible only to the clairvoyant eye. It has been described as the great picture gallery of nature, for on it is indelibly impressed every act and thought that occurs in the physical or psychic realms. So just hearing that, you can see how this links with karma. So everything that happens is impressed in the astral light. Now, Geoffrey Farthing quotes the subject of psychometry, which is where the vibrations are read from objects. It could be a watch, it could be a ring, it could be an item of clothing, it could be a wall of a house. That's how Edgar Cayce used to do his readings sometimes when the person wasn't there. So that all these actions are impressed in the astral light, and you'll see later how long they remain there. So in Isis, oh yes, I was going to say Geoffrey Farthing says that psychometry offers immediate evidence of the existence of the astral light, and quotes HPB on this. HPB short for H.P. Blavatsky, of course. So from her book Isis Unveiled, book 1, she says, one of the most interesting discoveries of modern times is that of the faculty which enables a certain class of sensitive persons to receive from any object held in the hand or against the forehead impressions of the character or appearance of the individual or any other object with which it has previously been in contact. So not everyone can do this, but I've been in groups where we've experimented, and I was surprised that I did pick up a little something. And I don't consider myself particularly sensitive in that way. Thus, a manuscript, painting, article of clothing or jewelry, no matter how ancient, conveys to the sensitive a vivid picture of the writer, painter, or wearer, even though he lived in the days of Ptolemy or Enoch, in other words, thousands of years ago. Nay more, a fragment of an ancient building will recall its history and even the scenes which transpired within or about it. A bit of ore will carry the soul vision back to the time when it was in process of formation. HPB says that this phenomenon proves that every occurrence in nature, no matter how minute or unimportant, leaves its indelible impress upon physical nature. And as there has been no appreciable molecular disturbance, the only inference possible is that these images have been produced by that invisible universal force, ether or astral light. And that's from Isis. She illustrated the subject by referring to a remarkable example of the exercise from a Professor W. Denton and his wife, who wrote the following in their book, The Soul of Things, or Psychometric Researches and Discoveries. And HPB clearly agrees with what is being said here. So this is what they said. Not a leaf waves, not an insect crawls, not a ripple moves, but each motion is recorded by 1,000 faithful scribes in infallible and indelible scripture. This is just as true of all past time. From the dawn of light upon this infant globe, when round its cradle the steamy curtains hung, to this moment, nature has been busy photographing everything. What a picture gallery is hers. It is on these indestructible tablets of the astral light that is stamped the impression of every thought we think and every act we perform, and that the future events, effects of long forgotten causes, are already delineated as a vivid picture for the eye of the seer and prophet to follow. Memory is to the student of old philosophies merely a name to express that power which man unconsciously exerts and shares with many of the inferior animals, to look with inner sight into the astral light, and there behold the images of past sensations and incidents. So she's saying we can all do this. It's there for the taking. We just have to do it. Instead of searching the cerebral ganglia, so that's part of the brain, for micrographs of the living and the dead, of scenes that we have visited, of incidents in which we have borne a part, they went to the vast repository where the records of every man's life, as well as every pulsation of the visible cosmos, are stored up for all eternity. In the above quotation from Isis, HPB quotes a sentence from a work by a contemporary scientist for whose writings she has a high regard. This was Dr. J.W. Draper, a chemist with a special interest in photography and a pioneer in that field. She saw a parallel between the invisible record made by the camera, invisible that is, until chemical processes bring out the hidden pictures, and the record made on the tablets of the astral light, perceptible to those in whom appropriate faculties are developed. Later, she quotes the following from the same source. A shadow never falls upon a wall without leaving thereupon a permanent trace, a trace which might be made visible by resorting to proper processes. The portraits of our friends or landscape views may be hidden on the sensitive surface from the eye, but they are ready to make their appearance as soon as proper developers are resorted to. A spectre is concealed on a silver or glassy surface until we make it come forth into the visible world. Upon the walls of our most private apartments, where we think the eye of intrusion is altogether shut out, and our retirement can never be profaned, there exist the vestiges of all our acts, silhouettes of what we have done. So you see the analogy that in the old method of printing photographs, an image would start to appear when the correct process was gone through. And in the same way, everything we've done is in there in the astral light, only we can't see it, so we don't remember our own past. And we don't know why we face the situations we face now. But it is, she's saying, it's all there. And note well, this is an interesting description. HPB describes the astral light as the great deceiver of man's limited senses. So on the one hand, she's saying all these actions are there, but also at the same time, the astral light is the great deceiver, and I'll come on to more explanation about this in a little while. Now, in what follows, HPB is explaining how difficult it is to understand the astral light. And this comes from the transcripts of the discussions that HPB held with her close students back in the 80s or whenever it was, about that time. And they were very highly intelligent people, highly educated, and they weren't fools, but they found it difficult to understand. So these are the actual words of some of her students and her answers to their questions, which I think are really interesting. So there was a Mr. Keatley, and you can find that in this book, The Secret Doctrine Commentaries by Michael Gomes. And there's also another version of it, Secret Doctrine Dialogues, I think it's called, that the United Lodge of Theosophists put out, and it's also available as a free download. So Mr. Keatley says, is not astral light used here in a different sense from that on page 60? This is The Secret Doctrine, line 22. Please enlarge upon this idea of prototypes existing before becoming manifest upon the material plane. So Mr. Keatley is saying that HPB had used the term differently in different contexts, and he found this confusing. So her reply, I think, is amusing. She often was amusing in her replies. Well, yes, certainly. Well, astral light is a very wide term. As I said, I use this term because to use another would be to make the book still more incomprehensible. And heaven knows that they are complaining quite enough of its being very difficult to understand already. I have tried to avoid all such words, and I have put astral light in general. Now, suppose I had said that astral light is used here as a convenient term for one very little understood, namely the realm of Akasha or primordial light manifested in the divine ideation. Now, suppose I had to use this very long phrase. Few would understand it. I would have to explain what is divine ideation. I would have to explain what is the Akasha. I would have to explain the difference between Akasha and ether, and so on. Therefore, I use it simply as a term that everyone understands. And then she goes on more deeply into an explanation of the Akasha and the astral light. And this is from a book called The Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge, which is the same as the book I was referring to before. But in this version, The Transactions, she started to go through it and rewrite it from the transcript, but she didn't get very far. So this is altered from the actual meeting. So anyway, this is what she says. A question: what is meant by prototypes existing in the astral light? And you know that prototypes is an original model, and everything else then is copied from that. So her answer is, astral light is here used as a convenient phrase for a term very little understood, namely the realm of Akasha or primordial light manifested through the divine ideation. The latter must be accepted in this particular case as a generic term. So in other words, a general term, non-specific, for the universal divine and divine mind reflected in the waters of space or chaos, which is the astral light proper, and a mirror reflecting and reversing a higher plane. So I'm just going to pause on that just for a minute. So the Akasha is the highest, but in the astral light, the divine is reflected. So, and she goes on, in the absolute or divine thought, everything exists, and there has been no time when it did not so exist. But divine ideation is limited by the universal manvantaras. The realm of Akasha is the undifferentiated noumenal and abstract space, and noumenal means the opposite of phenomenal. Now, just to remind you, Manvantara is the period of manifestation. So divine ideation is limited by the universal Manvantaras. The realm of Akasha is the undifferentiated noumenal and abstract space. The astral light is that which mirrors the three higher planes of consciousness and is above the lower or terrestrial plane. Therefore, it does not extend beyond the fourth plane, where one may say the Akasha begins. So there's 7 planes, and the astral light mirrors the 3 higher planes. Now, this is important. There is one great difference between the astral light and the Akasha, which must be remembered. The latter, that is Akasha, is eternal. The former, astral light, is periodical. So the one is always there and the other comes and goes. It's periodic. Question, then do the prototypes exist on a plane higher than that of the astral light? Answer, the prototypes or ideas of things exist first on the plane of divine eternal consciousness, and thence become reflected and reversed in the astral light, which also reflects on its lower individual plane the life of our earth, recording it on its tablets. So this is probably where this term, the Akashic record, comes from. Therefore, is this astral light called illusion or Maya, because everything that's a reflection is an illusion. And that goes back to the statement she made before, that the astral light is the great deceiver of man's limited senses, because then we take the illusion to be the reality, and that is the problem. So astral light is important and essential, but you have to be careful with it because it's in the realm of illusion. Question, and what is the Akasha proper? The Akasha is the eternal divine consciousness, which cannot differentiate, have qualities, or act. Action belongs to that which is reflected or mirrored from it. The unconditioned and infinite can have no relation with the finite and conditioned. So that is the section of this talk that's about the astral light, but obviously, as you can see, a lot of it is referring to the Akasha. And this talk will be on YouTube eventually, because I've given you an awful lot of information, and I realize you can't just take it all in like that. If you really want the transcript, you could ask headquarters and I'll make it available to them, and you can have it. Otherwise, I'm afraid you've got to watch it again to get all the details. So anyway, that explains the first part of the talk, the astral light. So the most important thing to remember is that all our actions are impressed in the astral light forever. So we have to be careful what we say and do. Now we're going to move on to this very interesting and also difficult subject of the elementals. So I'm going to first explain how the universe, I'm going to use the word unfolds, but it's all an appearance, because remember, everything in the world of manifestation is an illusion, according to the theosophical teaching. So the creation appears to begin or unfold from Parabrahm, the highest, the all, the noumenal, finest, most spiritual, as opposed to phenomenal, which is perceptible to the senses, and appears to descend to its most material level before appearing to return to the source. But of course, it never actually leaves the source. The divine spark or monad, which is just the individual, makes its pilgrimage through all the kingdoms of nature. So what part do the elementals play in this scheme? So we're going to look at where to place the elemental kingdoms in this great unfolding. And to do that, I made this diagram where everything starts up in the divine. The divine isn't one of the kingdoms, because there's I think someone's speaking, but I can't really hear it. Damon, can you do anything about that? I don't know if Damon's there. Okay, anyway, so everything starts in the divine, and then you see down the left-hand side of the diagram, we've got 3 kingdoms of elementals. And then right down at the base is the mineral, which is a pivotal point. And then we have the vegetable, the animal, the human, and then returning to the divine. But remember, this is all an illusion. So we're going to look at these kingdoms a little bit. So there's 7 kingdoms. The first group comprises 3 degrees of elementals, or nascent, just coming into existence, centers of force. From the first stage of the differentiation of Mula Prakriti, that's the root substance, to its 3rd degree. That is from full unconsciousness to semi-perception. So there's you could say, a descent. And it starts by passing through these 3 different elemental kingdoms. The second or higher group embraces the kingdoms from vegetable to man. And then the mineral kingdom thus forms the central or turning point in the degrees of the monadic essence, considered as evoluting energy. So we've got the first group with 3 degrees of elementals, which is where they're just coming into existence, and they're centers of force. And then the second group embraces the kingdom from vegetable to man, and the mineral kingdom is the central or turning point. So there's the diagram again. So this is how it unfolds. Starts in the divine, goes through elemental kingdom 1, 2, and 3. And then here's the turning point at the mineral kingdom, then the vegetable, animal, human, and then back to the divine. There, I'll just, well, I went too soon to that. These are the 7 links of the evolutionary chain, a descent of spirit into matter. So I hope that's clear. So now what we're going to do is take a look more closely at the elementals. And this is from the Secret Doctrine commentaries again. So where HPV spoke to her close students. So Madame Blavatsky, elementals are simply the creatures produced for the various species in differentiation. That is to say, every differentiation of matter produces and evolves a kind of force or an intelligence, that which the Kabbalists and Rosicrucians called elemental spirits, nature's spirits. But we say there is an intelligence. In every one, there is a force. Hartmann there writes about undines. Now these are, undines are female water spirits or nymphs. And he believes they are real creatures. It is a little bit too much to believe in sylphs, which are wood nymphs. They are creatures of our imaginations, and they do not exist by themselves. Question, would not they exist to the person who believes in that seriously? Madame Blavatsky, every one of us can believe in elementals which they create for themselves. You can create an elemental, but this elemental will have no existence outside your vitiated imagination. Vitiated means impaired or spoiled. It will be an intelligence, but the form you will give it and the attributes you will give it will be of your own creation. And this is the horrible thing. And I apologize to anyone who doesn't like seeing all that primitive underlining and bold writing, but I just feel that some things have to have attention drawn to them. And by the way, speaking about wood nymphs and things like that, anyone who's familiar with A Midsummer Night's Dream will know all about the little creatures like that, which are obviously, he's referring to elemental forces there. So we can believe in elementals and we can create one, but they have no existence outside our imagination. And remember, our vitiated imagination. And it'll be of our own creation. And this is the horrible thing. Mr. Hall, and it weakens you physically. Madame Blavatsky, it will make a lunatic of you. It evaporizes you. This is why most mediums end in the lunatic asylums or get drunkards for life. That means become drunkards for life. So to me, this sounds a big warning. Be very careful of what you're doing with the elemental energies. So the student then asks, if I understand you, an elemental is a center of force without intelligence, without moral character or tendencies, but capable of being directed in its movements by human thoughts, which may, consciously or not, give it any form and to a certain extent, intelligence. HPB. The elementals, are centers of force or energy, which are acted on by us while thinking and in other bodily motions. We also act on them and give them form by a species of thought which we have no register of. In other words, we don't remember. We're not aware of it. So, my thought on this is if we're not even aware of what we're doing, there's potential danger with these forces, which is why we really do need to know what's going on in our mind. So the next question, if they, this is continuing. As the elemental world is automatic and like a photographic plate, all elements, all atoms continually arriving at and departing from the human system are constantly assuming the impression conveyed by the acts and thoughts of that person. And therefore, if he sets up a strong current of thought, he attracts elementals in greater numbers, and they all take on one prevailing tendency or color, so that all new arrivals find a homogeneous color or image which they instantly assume. So again, do you want to be doing this with your unhelpful thoughts? This is very significant. We're setting up strong currents of thought and attracting elementals in greater numbers. Student, if they are attracted and repelled by thoughts, do they move with the velocity of thought? It says sage here, it's HPB. They move with the velocity of thought. In their world, there is no space or time as we understand those terms. The whole astral world is a mass of illusion. Maybe a mass of illusion, but it has consequences, and you'll see she goes into this more. How then, all right, this is a question about doing phenomena, that's producing things. The phenomena are things like maybe producing a physical object or making bells ring, that sort of thing. So the student asks, how then about doing of They're doing a phenomenon by adepts. She says, the production of phenomena is not possible without either the aid or disturbance of elementals. Each phenomenon entails the expenditure of great force and also brings on a correspondingly great disturbance in the elemental world, which disturbance is beyond the limit natural to ordinary human life. So we need the aid or disturbance of elementals. And this is something that she'll tell you the sages don't do lightly. It then follows that as soon as the phenomenon is completed, the disturbance occasioned begins to be compensated for. So in other words, you might get your bell tinkling, but you have to pay a price for it. The elementals are in greatly excited motion and precipitate themselves in various directions. They are not able to affect those who are protected, but they are able, or rather it is possible for them, to enter into the sphere of unprotected persons, and especially those persons who are engaged in the study of occultism, which is worrying. And then they become agents in concentrating the karma. They become agents in concentrating the karma of those persons, producing troubles and disasters often, or other difficulties which otherwise might have been so spread over a period of time as to be not counted more than the ordinary vicissitudes of life. This will go on to explain the meaning of the statement that an adept will not do a phenomenon unless he sees the desire in the mind of another lower or higher adept or student. For then there is sympathetic relation established and also a tacit acceptance of the consequences which may ensue. So the adept will be aware that there will be consequences even to him or her. It's not just lower beings. There is always a consequence to doing these things. It will also help to understand the peculiar reluctance often of some persons who can perform phenomena to produce them in cases where we may think their production would be beneficial, and also why they are never done in order to compass worldly ends, as is natural for worldly people to suppose might be done, such as procuring money, transferring objects, influencing minds, and so on. So you can see that every one of these statements is a warning to take great care. Just keeping an eye on the time now. So the next question is there any reason why you did not give me a more detailed explanation of the constitution of elementals and the modes by which they work? Yes, there are many reasons. Among others is your inability, shared by most of the people of the present day, to comprehend a description of things that pertain to a world with which you are not familiar and for which you do not yet possess terms of expression. Were I to put forth these descriptions, the greater part would seem vague and incomprehensible on the one hand, while on the other, many of them would mislead you because of the interpretation put on them by yourself. Another reason is that if the constitution, field of action, and method of action of the elementals were given out, there are some minds of a very inquiring and peculiar bent who could soon find out how to come into communication with these extraordinary beings, with results disadvantageous to the community as well as the individuals. So again, she's saying beware, beware, beware always. Consequences are not only to yourself, but also to the community. Why so? Is it not well to increase the sum of human knowledge, even respecting most recondite parts of nature? And that means the most abstruse or beyond ordinary knowledge. Or can it be that the elementals are bad? It is wise to increase the knowledge of nature's laws, but always with proper limitations. All things will become known someday. Nothing can be kept back when men have reached the point where they can understand. But at this time, it would not be wise to give them for the asking certain knowledge that would not be good for them. That knowledge relates to elementals, and it can for the present be kept back from the scientists of today. So long as it can be retained from them, it will be, until they and their followers are of a different stamp. Now, note the following very well. As to the moral character of the elementals, they have none. They are colorless in themselves, except some classes, and merely assume the tint, so to speak, of the person using them. So if you think they have a minds of their own, they don't. There's no moral. They just take on the color of what's around them. Will our scientific men one day be able to use these beings? And if so, what will be the manner of it? Will their use be confined to only the good men of the earth? And the answer is, the hour is approaching when all this will be done. But the scientists of today are not the men to get this knowledge. They are only pygmy forerunners who sow seed and delve blindly in no thoroughfares there. Sorry, I'm not sure if that's right. They are too small to be able to grasp these mighty powers, but they are not wise enough to see that their methods will eventually lead to black magic in centuries to come, when they shall be forgotten. When elemental forces are used similarly as we now see electricity and other natural energies adapted to various purposes, there will be war in heaven. And you have to say that the splitting of the atom has got to be something she had in mind when she was saying these things. Good men will not alone possess the ability to use them. Indeed, the sort of man you now call good will not be the most able. The wicked will, however, pay liberally for the power of those who can wield such forces. And at last, the supreme masters who now guard this knowledge from children will have to come forth. Then will ensue a dreadful war, in which, as has ever happened, the masters will succeed and the evildoers be destroyed by the very engines, principalities, and powers prostituted to their own purposes during years of intense selfish living. And then she throws away this line, but why dilate on this? In these days, it is only a prophecy. Now, I know all that is, I don't like being a prophet of doom, but I'm telling you what she said in her works. And I think it's, I just want to put this out there because I'm just saying, don't try to mess with these forces. If you think it would be a good idea, think again. Read this, keep reading it, keep reminding yourself. Just don't do it. But there is some good news, which we're coming to. So, permit me to ask you again, the student asks, are elementals beings? The answer, it is not easy to convey to you an idea of the constitution of elementals. Strictly speaking, they are not beings, that is, because the word elementals has been used in reference to a class of them that have no being, such as mortals have. Many things well known about them cannot be put into ordinary language. So I think now what follows is very important. And it's coming now onto the third part of the talk, which is about karma. Is there not some connection between the karma of man and elementals? Answer, a very important one. The elemental world has become a strong factor in the karma of the human race. Being unconscious, automatic, and photographic, it assumes the complexion of the human family itself. In the earlier ages, when we may postulate that man had not yet begun to make bad karma, the elemental world was more friendly to man because it had not received unfriendly impressions. Well, that's very, very important. And remember earlier, it was talking about the problem being years of intense selfish living. And that would lead to this war in heaven, this dreadful war. But so soon as man began to become ignorant, unfriendly to himself and the rest of creation, the elemental world began to take on exactly the same complexion and return to humanity the exact pay, so to speak, due for the actions of humanity. And notice this isn't just one person, this is humanity. It's not even one country. So the elemental world, being unconscious force, returns or reacts upon humanity exactly as humanity acted towards it, whether the actions of men were done with the knowledge of these laws or not. So ignorance isn't protection. It happens whether it's done in ignorance or with knowledge. So in these times, it has come to be that the elemental world has the complexion and action, which is the exact result of all the actions and thoughts and desires of men from the earliest times. And being unconscious and only acting according to the natural laws of its being, the elemental world is a powerful factor in the workings of karma. And this is very important. And so long as mankind does not cultivate brotherly feeling and charity towards the whole of creation, just so, just so long will the elementals be without the impulse to act for our benefit. So as long as mankind does not cultivate brotherly feeling and charity towards the whole of creation, the elementals will be without the impulse to act for our benefit. But so soon and whenever man or men begin to cultivate brotherly feeling and love for the whole of creation, there and then elementals begin to take on the new condition. So there is hope. And of course, we all know that in the world, there's a lot more feeling about caring for others, caring for the planet. So I do see it as hopeful, ultimately. So my question now is, what is the connection between the influence of the elemental kingdoms and the astral light? Remember what HPB says in Isis Unveiled, Book 1. It is on these indestructible tablets of the astral light that is stamped the impression of every thought we think and every act we perform, and that the future events, effects of long forgotten causes, are already delineated as a vivid picture for the eye of the seer and prophet to follow. Memory is to the student of old philosophies, merely a name to express that power which man unconsciously exerts, to look with inner sight into the astral light, and there behold the images of past sensations and incidents. They went to the vast repository where the records of every man's life, as well as every pulsation of the visible cosmos, are stored up for all eternity. A scary thought, all eternity. Is there not some connection between the karma of man and elementals? Oh yes, sorry, I'd written some extra notes in there, that's why I was pausing. So I'm just going to end on this, and this is a reminder of what I read to you just now. So is there not some connection between the karma of man and elementals? A very important one. The elemental world has become a strong factor in the karma of the human race. Being unconscious, automatic, and photographic, it assumes the complexion of the human family itself. In the earlier ages, when we may postulate that man had not yet begun to make bad karma, the elemental world was more friendly to man because it had not received unfriendly impressions. But so soon as man began to become ignorant, unfriendly to himself and the rest of creation, the elemental world began to take on exactly the same complexion and return to humanity the exact pay, so to speak, due for the actions of humanity. Oh. Yeah, so that's where I'm ending, and I hope it wasn't too depressing and shocking for anyone who's never heard of these things. But I see it as being, please take note of what is said. And you know, HPB was a very special person, and those of us who know something about her know how very special she was. And she didn't say things that she didn't mean, and she didn't talk about things that weren't very, very serious. And to me, I don't think it gets more serious than this. So I would just urge you all, please, to try and look on the positive side and say, let's do what we can to add to all the good thoughts and the good actions. And of course, I do have to say, there are many, many people on the planet doing a huge amount of good. We hear about it. If we look into it, you don't hear about it on the news very much. But there are amazing people and amazing efforts being made. So we have the power to change the character of the elementals. And when that becomes stronger than the ignorance and the selfishness, then things will begin to change on Earth. So I'm going to stop the share there.